days. Amen. Friends, I appreciate the good work that was done in commissions, and we will have more opportunity later this afternoon for that work to continue and hopefully come to conclusion. We are gathered here in plenary for the next couple of hours, and this will be our opportunity now to begin to engage in a deeper way in the material from the CRTG and the Sessional Committee. The first thing I want to say to you is that we have enough time. I know there has been some anxiety in our midst saying this is such an important piece of work, and I even heard somebody, I think it was Richard on Mic 3, saying, we ain't going to leave here, are we, until it is done. And so we will leave on time, but there will be sufficient opportunity for us to deal with what we need to deal with. The comprehensive review / sessional report is clearly our priority. There are other significant pieces of business like one order of ministry, truth and reconciliation, mutual recognition of ministries, communion with the United Church of Christ. All of that will fit in, and we will also elect our new moderator, but there is time, so just breathe into it. The Business Committee, after each of our sessions of debate, will continue to meet and plot our way forward so that, in fact, there is a flexible agenda to respond to what emerges session by session. I want to give a lot of thanks to all of those individuals and table groups who have offered up questions in response to the presentations by the Sessional Committee. They have been incredibly helpful. They have all been read and reviewed, and we have actually experienced them as an incredibly helpful way of shaping and guiding our process into discussion. Many of the questions that you asked as we read through them were clearly leading us into the very heart of the matter. And so it didn't feel appropriate to try to respond to them on a one-by-one basis because they take us to the center of the debate. A second group of questions were clearly questions that were lifting up significant and important details, but they pertained primarily to implementation, saying, if we pass thus and so, what about this detail and how will it manifest in the new structure? Those questions are almost too detailed for a court this size to answer, and in any case cannot be answered until we come to decisions on the broader strokes. So we will be going through our time recognizing that we will be working at higher level is not quite the right term, but the key concepts and decisions, knowing that then it will need to be rolled out. We have been clear that the questions are valuable and they will be at the very end of our time referred to the General Secretary or the Executive to offer questions and wisdom and guidance for the implementation process. So it will not be as if they have been lifted up, read once, and then put to the side. They will continue to do good work. There was a third body of questions that were primarily questions for clarification. Many of the answers to those questions are already in the written material. There was a lot of written material. And I also know that many of us probably read the report some time ago, and so some of the answers to those questions aren't immediately at the front of your mind. Rather than try to go through all those questions and say, look at page such and such, I trust that those questions, the answers to them around clarification, they will emerge during our on-the-floor discussion. Now, because of that, a change has occurred in our original plan. We had originally decided that we were going to ask both the Sessional Committee and possibly the chair of the Comprehensive Review Task Group to respond to the questions. But what we have heard so clearly is that we're hungry to get at it. What we don't need is further presentation. What we need is to begin the debate and the discussion, and the clarity will begin to emerge. So for that reason, I am going to ask our Secretary General to bring a motion of thanks and releasing.
Thanks for the promotion.
Oh.
We have a motion we'll put up, but it's a very simple one, simply to offer our deep and sincere thanks to the members both of the Comprehensive Review Task Group and of the Sessional Committee for the incredible work that has let this body of work be brought to the bigger group for consideration and to release them from their work. So I would offer that motion.
So you see the motion, it is up on the screens, that we express our sincere thanks and to both members of CRTG and Sessional Committee and release them from their work. Nora has moved that. Do I have a seconder? Noah Richardson, he gets it because he's right there in the front, and I know his name and can repeat it in the microphone. And so, is there any discussion on that motion? I see a visitor to our court. Coming to microphone 1. There's a certain familiarity. I recognize microphone 1.
Mr. Moderator, what do you mean a visitor to this court? Aren't you, in fact, the person who called me and invited me to do this work?
Well, yes, indeed.
And didn't you see my face on all of those videos?
Yes, I take it back.
And so therefore, you would know me, wouldn't you?
Oh, very well.
Thank you very much. Plus, I was here a couple of nights ago.
Yes,
and
you
I
were.
had a few things to say at that time.
I just thought you'd left then.
Well, Mr. Moderator, you get a point. Can you believe what they're doing? Can you believe it? It's an abomination. You work, and you work, and you work, and you type so hard that your keyboard doesn't work anymore. And then what do? They dismiss you. They dismiss you. This is the last straw, the very last straw. They dismiss you with thanks, and I have only one thing to say to that. You're welcome.
Lord knows, madam, we would never, ever dismiss you. Impossible. But we will release you for further work and opportunity. Therefore, with no further discussion, I ask the court to, well, I guess we get to use our clickers, do we? This is a motion, so haul out those clickers. Remember, do not press a button until we see the number on the screen and I give the okay. Were the clicker people ready for this? I love using it. I'm not allowed to use a clicker. I don't vote, but I'm so...
It's faster.
In 10 seconds, I'm just going to call for a fast show of hands. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
You wanted the clickers, Gary.
I wanted the clickers, but the number is not showing. 4, 3. Okay, click. This is the motion to release and give thanks to CRTG and Sessional Committee members.
Apparently they're not working.
They're not working? You're not able to click? Let's just wait till we see the number 0 arrive. Yes, they're working. No. John, I recognize you at mic 1. Sorry, mic 2. John at mic 1.
Those of us who were in the Blueberry Commission got to vote, and people who were Partridge Berry or Baked Apple didn't, because I think of the fact Blueberry was in this space before.
We have a motion, number 2, good, okay. We have a motion, all those in favor, please raise your clickers and hands. Any opposed to this? I'm looking even at the, no, even our visitor is in favor. It is passed. And deeply, one more round of applause for the work of these people. And I must admit, I'm very grateful for the levity that can enter into even the most serious of our discussions. I do remember a phrase and a description from one of our youth saying, I believe that it was at Fort McMurray, the church there, that prayer and laughter got linked together in a way that felt life-giving, which is what I'm feeling here. So, the business committee and representatives and council have come together and have a game plan for our process. And I want to just describe what that will look like before we launch right into it. We are going to begin working directly with the proposals brought by the Sessional Committee, and we will deal with them in numerical order, one right through to the end of CRTG 7 and then into what is now called SC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The only exception will be CRTG number 7, which deals with the question of remits. And we'll deal with remits at the very end, because until we get to the end, we won't know what remits are actually needed. So that tends to be a technical problem. Do you want to interrupt me at this point? Microphone 1.
Jim McKibben, Toronto Conference. Moderator, I'm actually seeking advice, but I would like to make a motion. I'm prepared to move that we vote immediately on the Sessional Committee report in its entirety. I will be voting against it because the proposal contains a great number of inconsistencies and unintended consequences. I believe we have asked the Sessional Committee to put a square box in a round hole. I also believe that in their work, they have dismantled, in large part, the work of the Comprehensive Review Task Group. It would be a better use of the court's time, in my view, to use the source document of the CRTG proposals, United in God's Work, and have that as the basis of discussion. I would be prepared to move that, and I have a seconder in hand who would second that motion.
I would like, on some advice just received, to ask the court and your permission if I could continue the description of the process, which may in fact answer your concern. And if not, then we could invite you back and you could make the motion. Was that acceptable? Okay, thank you. We will work through, now where was I? In the order, and we will, yes, okay. Secondly, this is just a practical thing. We believe everybody is going to need a hard copy of that sessional report. So this is just process. There were 300 made, 3 for each table. Some of you will be able to rely on your screens, but we are making sure that hard copies are available. If you do not have a hard copy and want one, this is a moment to put up your hand, and stewards will distribute those with you. Secondly, as you're waiting for that to happen, we encourage you to bring out and make easily accessible the report from the CRTG, because we are going to be working with both documents at the same time. So you need to have both sets of material. And that'll just make it easier and more straightforward. Okay. Now, when we come to each one of the recommendations from the Sessional Committee, we will have discussion, and during that discussion we will be able to add or delete. We will be able to reinsert material from the CRTG report as we see fit, or we will be able to add new thoughts and new perceptions as well. So by walking through the Sessional Committee, we will have a way forward, and as we deal with that, we will be able to make direct reference back to and even continue back to the CRTG if we choose. You may have heard our business committee last night report. If we vote the sessional committee down, then we return to CRTG. What we've recognized in further discussion is this needs to be done simultaneously, and it may result, in fact, in having the CRTG original rather than the sessional committee replacement. But the sessional committee at this moment has given us a framework by which we can deal with that. Then, the proposal that I am offering is that we will deal with each one of those recommendations in the proposal stage. This is our normal technique, so you will need your cool and warm cards, and we will proceed to the end of each one of those recommendations till we are at the point where we feel comfortable about moving it to a motion. Again, our normal procedure, but we will not move it to a motion at that point, but we will wait until we've had all our proposals come to a point where we think we now have a full picture of where we are. And all of them have been talked through to the point where we feel we've reached essential warmth or can live in the differences. Then we will go back and we will turn them into motions, and we will walk through and then officially and formally pass them, knowing what the full picture is. We are suggesting this model because we don't want to pass motions which in fact we may need to revisit in the light of later decisions and go through an awkward process of amending or reconsidering or rescinding. If they are in the proposal stage, then the discussion will be much more fluid and we'll be able to make such changes as we need. At the end, before any of the voting, there will be a final version up on the screen, and we hope that there will be final version in print, but we'll do our absolute best to ensure that there is final print for you to take away. I have a couple of other things that are going to launch us into that, but this is probably a full description of the process that we are suggesting, which is therefore to walk through sessional committee, knowing that at each step of the way, we will be able to add, subtract, return to CRTG, or do what we need and understand the implications. Nora, General Secretary, do you have further comments?
Well, just to add to that, based on the motion that we had notice of just a moment ago without it formally being seconded just yet, my advice that I'm getting is that if we want to be really technical, that's out of order until the other motion is on the floor. And because since we're dealing with a proposal method, until we work our way through it, that's going to be some way down the road. So that that's the technical thing, but more in the practical way, what I heard being as an area of concern is perhaps arising out of what was said the other day that you'd have to defeat these things in order to go back and talk about the task group. And I think that was one of those comments made after a quick look. And as we've had the further discussion, the process that the moderator has just outlined has been developed that we think allows everybody to raise the points they want to lift back in the pieces from the task group if in fact they wanted to, or to add different pieces if that's what they wanted. So my recommendation, moderator, is that you proceed with the process as outlined.
I recognize microphone 2.
Erin Todd, Manitou Conference, member of the just released sessional committee. So I think at this point I just, and completely without emotional attachment to anything we might adopt or not adopt or motions we might pass, I think it's really important just to reiterate what our philosophy throughout our process in the sessional committee has been. And we've struggled very hard to stay true to this. And that is that, and I may be sort of mishearing the motion that was made, but the language that I'm hearing is that the sessional committee has dismantled the CRGT report. The sessional committee, as we believe we successfully did, was to listen to the church, proposals coming from the church, and to struggle very hard to discern what the church, all of you, were saying to the CGRT, I can't even say it anymore, Comprehensive Review Report. So I feel some anger rising up in me at the suggestion that the sessional committee did anything on their own initiative.
Okay.
We tried to listen to the church.
Yep.
So if you throw it out, but know that this isn't something we pulled out of our brains. This is our work on your behalf. I just had to say.
Okay, thank you very much and appreciate that. Friends, I'm going to interrupt at this moment. A key thing is I'm going to ask people not to applaud after any particular speaker. I know that sometimes that resonates with within us, but it immediately has the potential to set up some tension. And so let's not applaud after any speaker. We'll just keep the process moving. So I am wondering, would you like to return to the mic then, please, Jim?
Yes, I'll bow to the wisdom of the Business Committee, but if I can clarify my remark about dismantling.
Okay.
And let me clarify it by being very specific. The CRTG report was a report that was organized over the course of 2.5 years. We know the labor that went into it. For the most part, the proposals that came about the CRTG report were proposals that in part opposed content in the CRTG report. And that is the box I saw the sessional committee being put in, in the sense that they were responding to the naysayers. They weren't hearing those of us who really thought that the CRTG report was a very positive thing. So my apologies to the sessional committee. It was not my intent to disparage their work. In fact, I believed that their work was untenable, that we did put them in an untenable position. And that was only in the sense that we would perhaps move along by going to the source document that might assist us. But I'll bow to the wisdom of the Business Committee, and I hope that explains the purpose of my motion. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I really do. I'm going to just take a quick read of the court. This is going to be an opportunity for our cards. These are not for voting, remember? This is to take a temperature, so you're going to hold up one or the other of these, and I won't be saying now raise one or the other. It'll be done together so that we have a temperature read of where we are without having to have a formal vote. And the question I want to ask is, do you feel basically warm with going along with the procedure, the process that the Business Committee has designed and that I have outlined to you, having heard the comments from both Jim and from Aaron and the concerns that have been raised? So could you just lift up your cards, warm in favor or people opposed? I am seeing that yes, there's one or two folks not thoroughly thrilled with it, but the majority of us are saying we will go with this process. Let me say, we have our 2 hours now, and we'll see where we're at, and agendas are always flexible. Thank you. So, what I'm going to suggest now is exactly what I outlined. We will begin with proposal number 1 from the Sessional Committee. And so I'm hoping that you have your document in front of you, and I hope that you have your United in God's Work document as well, because the Sessional Committee often gave an abbreviated form of the motion simply for their own reference, and so we probably need to see both. And we will be numbering them probably slightly differently, but what we have now in front of us, the Sessional Committee recommends that General Counsel 42 adopt CRTG 1 and refer to the General Secretary for implementation, and then gives 6 6 comments to be considered in the implementation. So I'm not sure who has formally moved that. No, I'm sorry, we're in proposal. Sorry, my mistake. Thank you. So we are in a proposal stage. This is the proposal before us, and I would now invite discussion from the mics on the wisdom of our essentially agreeing with this. And at the end of our discussion or through that, I will do again a reading of the court through our warm or cool cards. I recognize a speaker at microphone 2, and remember always to identify yourself.
Alan Buckingham, Alberta Northwest Conference. I think a few people might have questions or other suggestions for implementation, and I'm just curious what the method may be so we don't have to sit here and discuss any implementation stuff, but if we can be assured that at some point we'll get a way to feed in suggestions for implementation, that'd be great.
And it's a great question, Alan, because all the things that you have before you, even though there was a lot of detail in the report from the Comprehensive Review Task Group, the fine details aren't there. And so any of these things will require implementation steps. And what you'd be approving at this meeting on pretty well everything is the framework, the biggest picture, to then let us move ahead. And in most cases, it would be the executive approving the next steps. Like, for example, on this one, and some of the questions that came in on this one were about who would decide how the money was allocated and so on. But once this overall thing were approved, then there'd be terms of reference developed in consultation with people in different areas and taken to the executive for their approval.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Paul Browning, London Conference. I have a question as to process. I believe I heard yesterday that we were going to hear from the business people or someone relative to questions that we asked as tables on the forms that we were given. So our table is waiting to hear back on a question and feedback we had for the document, and just wondering how and when that happens. Thank you.
Do you want to answer? Or it can be he.
I could just mention the moderator, in outlining the process, just explained that there were many, many questions received, and some of them were specific that need to be considered in implementation, and they'll all be referred on for consideration in that way. Others were the kinds of things that told us you're ready to have the discussion or debate. So if there's a question you feel you need to raise, this is the place to do it. If we started having people stand up and answer all of the ones that came in individually, you wouldn't ever get to the actual discussion. So the point was to have the opportunity for you to begin engaging by coming to the mic and bringing a question if you have one.
Microphone 2.
Russell Mitchell-Walker, Saskatchewan Conference. So just to clarify with what you just said, are we just asking questions now, or can we give reflections?
Reflections.
Okay. So this is one part of the review that I'm quite excited about. I think it will really help us move forward into this time of the church. I wanted to share that I'm very pleased with seeing I don't see it up on the screen, but the piece that asks about evaluating our revenue resources and seeing where other sources of funding for this might come from. I wanted to share that I had experienced this year an opportunity to speak with Brian McLaren, who, according to Phyllis Tickle, is the Martin Luther of this emerging church movement that we are part of. And when I asked him, how can we be more part of this movement as an institution, one of the things he said was, free up, you're selling a lot of churches are closing, free up those resources for the future of the church. And when we talked about chasing the Spirit, that's what he said, yep, that would be great to direct that to. He said, sequester those funds. Now, I don't think we're prepared to do that. At Saskatchewan Conference, I proposed about 30% of sale of churches, and that is in one of the background of our Saskatchewan proposals. So just wanted to affirm that's an exciting piece to see in this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a couple of other comments to remind us that we're now probably going to be looking at time limits, and we've agreed in our original process of 90 seconds, more or less. And also that what we're moving towards here is that do we feel basically warm and that we can say amen to this proposal, and then we will come back. But this is the time for comments and certainly, Paul, for questions.
So our table was...
So just re-identify.
Paul Browning, London Conference.
Yeah, thank you.
Our table was positive about the section method of assessment, and there'll be a task group to look at that around fairness, and there are principles there. But we wanted to, our question was there a way to see the will of the court in adding another principle that we believe is vitally important. We have heard here and there that with this new assessment system, assessments to congregations could be going up by about.
Okay. Can I interrupt, Paul?
Yes.
Because what we're in discussion now is only the first proposal, nothing to do with assessments.
Okay, so
Nothing.
we're just doing this.
We're just
one-
doing
okay.
number one.
To be
We're going to have a
continued.
heated discussion, I know, on assessments.
Okay.
But this is just number one. Hence why we're walking it through. I see another person at microphone 2.
Patrick Woodbeck, Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario. One thing that I found missing in the first proposal was any talk around the idea of encouraging or intentional work around mission merger in the church. How can we understand that we might be able to do more together as communities of faith than individual? And I think that that's a very important part that we might be missing.
Now, we're at a stage of proposal, and I'm hearing Patrick raise the idea that if we looked at implementation, that perhaps we might consider mission merger as another factor to consider. I'm wondering how you would feel about that. And this is where I would ask you again, think of that, and it doesn't make it a fact, but it might become part of the implementation. So if you feel warm to including that as a seventh thing to think about, or cool to it, could I just see where the cards would be?
Well, I have a point of clarification.
Yes?
G. McDonald, BC Conference. We wonder at our table what mission merger means.
Thank you very much, Jean. That's an excellent question. Patrick?
Patrick Woodbeck, Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario. In the context in which I'm using it is intentional work within communities of faith to discuss how communities of faith might do better work together than individual.
Okay. Okay. So, say that again, please.
So and maybe I can just, because I think everybody uses the proposal method differently in different conferences, executive and so on, but just to be clear, and it's good to get it started, generally what's meant by the proposal method is we take what's in front of us and we invite people to say, is there some way in which what's written there would need to change in order for you to be able to support it? And then we try to get wording that's as complete as it can be so that it could move to the motion stage and have a vote at a later point. So it isn't typically the time with minor nuances or with things that why we like it or don't like it, but more is something else needing to be there, and if so, to suggest what that might be, and then those that are working on the proposal and projecting it could add something. And that's why the moderator was kind of saying, are people warm or cool to that? But maybe people weren't sure exactly what was being said. So
are you asking Patrick to go and add that wording or not?
if there's something that Patrick needs to see added so that he could support it, then he might offer some wording. And if not, we'll take that as part of the discussion that took place here, and it would be part of the record of the meeting.
Okay. So while he is working on that, I'll recognize microphone 2.
Sue Browning, London Conference. I'm kind of getting all this information and trying to put it into what I'm about to say. When we discussed this with the original CRTG report, one of the questions that came up at our conference gatherings were, how does this fit into the work of the EDGE network? And a thought that I have is that we've had 3 years of establishing the EDGE network, which is doing the same kind of thing. And we've put a lot of money already into advertising and into promotional material and into resourcing the EDGE network. So rather than throw that all away, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can, in this motion, say, kind of use the word EDGE as facilitating this process of chasing the Spirit.
So in a technical sense, Sue, you probably could, and if you want to offer something, that could be added in. Another thing to remember that in this gathering, a gathering of this size, you are trying to give the broader direction so that then once that direction's given, we can sit down and see, is the EDGE what would be the best mechanism across the country? Is that what it would be forever? Will it be evolving into something else later? All those kind of detailed things so that there'd be a plan to go to the executive about implementation, the terms of reference and all that kind of thing. Because as a body, you might add that piece in, but there are going to be other details by way of terms of reference that you're not the best equipped group to do because you only have this much time and you've got this many people. So it's always that judgment call, how much you want to build into detail here, how much you simply want to, as you've said, have that as a suggestion that would be then taken into account at the implementation stage.
So can I just ask a question then, Nora? If it is a suggestion, if it's a strong suggestion, how do we go about saying that? And who do we say that to? Do we just say it to you? Hey, Nora.
Yeah, for sure, always write to me. Anything that gets passed, if you have ideas about implementation, an email, a letter's a good idea. I think Sue's probably got it in the minutes now, too.
Excellent.
Okay. Okay. Microphone 2.
Patrick Woodbeck, Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario again. So the wording that I would recommend for Proposal 1 of the Sessional Committee, which relates to Recommendation 1, Chasing the Spirit, is halfway through that recommendation. It says, this commitment to the United Church's future would be demonstrated by investing 10% of annual givings to the Mission and Service Fund in local and regional initiatives to transform existing ministries, including intentional missional missional merger work and launch new ones. So that it's articulated missional merger, intentional missional merger work within that Chasing the Spirit.
Patrick, I've already heard from some people that nobody always knows what missional merger is. Could you add a few words that actually says what that is? You've explained it to the court, but in your addition there.
And if our projectionists could put the proposal up, I think it would help everybody. I know what they're trying to do right now is incorporate the two things together to make sure you have everything up there. Thank you.
So where are we? We're at.
So Patrick, if you can just tell them where to add in words after something.
That's the Sessional Committee document and not the CRTG document.
Yeah. That's right.
Because that's what
Well,
if we go to the
we need to go to the CRT. He's going to Chasing the Spirit. Patrick is referring to Chasing the Spirit 1A in the CRTG document at that point, which is what the Sessional Committee has recommended. So
it says the Comprehensive Task Group proposes at the 42nd General Council 2015, 1, commit to supporting new ministries and new forms of ministry through an initiative tentatively called Chasing the Spirit. And I would put in there, including intentional mission merger work around how churches can do more together than individually.
okay. So now you see it with some clarity. We've had a bit of discussion. Again, are you warm to that or cool to that, including that as part of the implementation? Basically, I'm seeing that as cool. And so I'm going to rule that it be considered. It will be held in the minutes, will be part of the discussion, but will not be part of the actual proposal that eventually will go to a movement. A motion. Microphone 4. Microphone 4, please. Still not on? I don't think it's on.
Rachel, it's on.
I'm not sure.
Moses Canhigh, Saskatchewan Conference.
Speak up.
Moderator Moses Canhigh, Saskatchewan Conference. I just want to make a brief observation about the third item in the Sessional Committee report with the sentence starting, consider setting. with the sentence starting, consider setting, the word intercultural that's mentioned in there, one reading it would consider intercultural to be a diverse ministry expression. I make the comment only because it will affect other things we'll be doing in the course of the General Council. My understanding of intercultural is we're all intercultural. And intercultural is not a group of individuals or an expression of diverse ministry. So I'd rather see in this and future documents the word intercultural being considered more broadly and not as a category of members of the church.
Moses, how would you change this? Because as I read it, it says diverse ministry expressions with 6 different examples. So what change would you be proposing?
What I'm suggesting is the word intercultural is misplaced in there.
And you would like to see it out?
Yes. But it could be included in the first part of the sentence. I don't have language for it, but what I'm saying is that we need to, as we begin this conversation, ensure that we position our understanding of intercultural, that it is not sort of a particular diverse ministry. We're all intercultural.
I wonder, Moses, are you suggesting that the word intercultural be moved to follow diverse intercultural ministry? Is that your suggestion?
That would come pretty close.
Okay. So let me just do a test. We're just moving the word intercultural to be in the top line. Proportional targets for diverse intercultural ministry expressions, such as ecumenical, interfaith, francophone, and youth ministries. You're warm to that? I know some blue, but the majority. Okay, that'll go into the proposal. Daniel?
Daniel Reed, Bay of Quinte Conference. Can you guys hear me?
No, push it right up.
Daniel Reed,
Yeah.
Bay of Quinte Conference. So I have a question of clarification. Question of clarification. Is it good?
Yeah, we have to talk right into the mic.
Okay, I'm doing it. So, question of clarification about the background material to the CRTG report. Folks at my table group were particularly enthusiastic about education funding through Catching the Spirit. Didn't see it in the proposal as such, but did see it named in the background. Do we need to explicitly name that in the proposal, or is it good to stay in the background material?
I think any of the material in the report that is then picked up when the proposal that it's tied to is approved would be taken as direction towards the implementation. I don't think it needs to be repeated.
Thank you.
Microphone 2.
Brian Ransom, Toronto Conference. I'm just going back to the resourcing of this Catching the Spirit. We have capped it at 10% from the mission and service. I'm wondering if we might want to open the door a little bit more and just put a minimum of 10%, which allows us then, if we need further funding, if it's not there, that we can access further resourcing. So I would encourage, if we can, to add the word a minimum, not a maximum.
You could certainly do that. It's not necessary in the sense that the executive could always choose in approving a budget to allocate more money in that direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think microphone 2 and then microphone 1.
Matthew, London Conference. Given that many of the concerns I'm hearing are more about implementation, and given that what we have before us is broad policy documents, I'm looking for direction here, Mr. Moderator. Would it not be sufficient if we raise our concerns and trust that those concerns will go into the record, and that at the stage where the final wording and the implementation comes down, that all of those will serve to direct how these policies are implemented, rather than trying to go through and correct each and every word and get every phrase perfectly? I have complete trust in my brothers and sisters who work in Toronto. God, that's scary. But
it is a miracle.
It is indeed. But I understand people are trying to get concerns brought forward, but surely it's enough that if it's in the record, we can trust that CGE will turn to the record before it starts work?
Matthew, I appreciate that comment, and I would give an amen to our not needing to do the wordsmithing and the word by word, but I do want to hear from people who may have some significant concerns before we say, yeah, we can live with this as a proposal. So it's this balance, and at the moment I'm seeing only one more person at the mic, which may mean we're ready to say we can take a test on that. But microphone one.
Thank you, moderator. Danielle Ayana James. I am the one of two intercultural observers for this General Council 42, and mine may be experienced as a language issue, but I raise it with this intercultural hat. The language of the word intercultural in the third bullet, as I read it, is being used in placement of a more specific use of language, which would read racialized or ethnocultural. Interculturality, as the commitment we have made as a court, is much more about a way of being that is inclusive of all of these categories that have been named. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I believe that there may have been a slight misunderstanding in the use of the word intercultural here, and so would offer to the court, I don't offer to the court to think about leaving intercultural, you've already moved it, but adding the language of racialized and ethnocultural.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that would be added in where the word intercultural used to be?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me just do a quick test. How do you feel about that? Your orange or blue cards?
Okay.
Okay, that goes in. Thank you. Now, I'm not seeing anybody else at the mics, and I'm not encouraging it, neither discouraging. But I think we're ready. Let me test the will of the court. Are you ready to say this feels like a proposal that could go to a motion later, and let's just see where we're at? We're there, folks. I don't think I saw a single blue that we would need to hear from. And so, following the process, this recommendation now sits as a proposal. It will go later to become a motion, and we'll now proceed to number 2. So, Sessional Committee number 2, which is CRTG 2, having heard and reviewed Aboriginal ministries and have received no proposals, they recommend that we adopt CRTG 2. And so this is the proposal. And I'm now wanting to test. Where are we as a court on that? In basically warm, do I see any blue that would raise some concern on that? So it feels to me like Sessional Committee number 2, which is CRTG 2, is ready, and we accept it as a proposal, and later it will become a motion. Agreed? Hey, that's 2 down. Hey. Okay. Now the easy stuff, as Nora says. Okay. So this is where you are definitely going to need to have reports by your side, because as we experienced with the Sessional Committee doing their very best to say, we're jumping over because if you start changing one part, it has implications for the next. We're going to now start on their Sessional Committee or CRTG 3 about the 3 council model and the proposals that they have received. Now, before we start to move into the details, if you read that the 42nd General Council approved the reorganization of the United Church of Canada from its four-court structure to a 3-council structure consisting of communities of faith, regional councils, denominational council. And I want to stop, not with the as follows. What I would like to test is that the will of the court to say we are primarily and ready and warm to having deep discussion about 3-court model. What I don't want to do is to have us spend hours refining what a 3-court might look like and then have someone say, well, actually, I want a 4-court, and that we waste our time when what we really wanted was to somehow work with a 4-court model. And I'm not biased, I just want the clarity. So the question before you is, are we wanting to have serious discussion and we're moving in a direction of a 3-court model as opposed to a 4? Are you warm to that? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of cool cards. Thank you. I'm wondering if those who have raised cool cards would like to say anything to that. It's almost an overwhelming majority, but still, I want to just hear those voices. I recognize microphone 2.
Wyatt, Manitou, and I appreciate this opportunity. One of the things I left behind, and we were invited to think about that, was a hole in the ground I was digging. And now up in Manitou, if you're digging a hole in the ground, this is an outhouse hole, there are boulders about this big, and they're intertwined in roots, and then there are the stones. And when you get down 2.5 feet, then you hit something that the locals call hard pan. And that's compressed earth and sand that's so tight it's like concrete, and you need something like a pipe to loosen it up. I'm thinking about all of the effort that it will take to move from our present 4-court system to a 3-council organization of the church. I'm thinking about the fact that it will take 3 years to get to the point where the next general council, if the remits all pass, can endorse the result of the remits, and then the next 3 to 6 years will be used up in implementing the new organization. I am not in any way against change or the address to the contemporary moment in which the church finds itself. But I think that our amazing shrinking church is only a symptom of our deeper problem that we need to have the energy and time to address, and that is the crisis of faith in which we find ourselves.
Okay.
And for that reason...
Yep, finish your sentence.
And for that reason, I think, given some of the experiments that have already occurred in Newfoundland, in Toronto, and in British Columbia, and perhaps elsewhere that I don't know about, conferences and presbyteries can work together to streamline and to avoid duplication and to create the structure that we need in order to live within our means. And I think that we can do that. I think we are going to need recommendation 6 in any case. We are going to need an assessment system to be able to have any staff. But I do think, given finite resources of energy and money and focus, we need to stay with what we've got and make it work better. Thank you.
Thank you. Remember, no applause, no shouting. And I'm again going to remind the court that it's 90 seconds. So when I said finish the sentence, I sort of meant it. Microphone 2.
Can we have the cards up with 5 minutes, 30?
Yes,
Never mind.
yeah.
Richard Hollingsworth from Bay of Quinte. I came to the United Church with a very academic background, and the United Church, in its wisdom, I was highly urbanized, sent me to a rural pastoral charge along the Lake Huron coastline. In so doing, it forced me to change my theology, my whole orientation to ministry. But in so doing, it taught me the importance of presbytery. And in my 30-some-odd years in working with rural pastoral charges, training people for ministry within the rural pastoral charges, such as SORM, and in the licensed lay worship leadership, and also teaching courses at Queens, I have a profound regard for presbyteries. I was also part of the creation of Wesley Urban Ministries in downtown Hamilton, which was presbytery itself, creating a corporation. I was part of the creation of the Concerned Farm Women in Bruce County, but also with the Queens Bush Rural Ministry, which was the corporation created by a presbytery. I see in this going to a forecourt for rural churches, you're taking out some of the creative basic support for them as they do their ministries with their congregation and as they do their ministries within their community. If we go to a regional body, you'll lose that connectivity with rural congregations and rural presbyteries and rural communities. So I see this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Microphone 2.
Bill McCausland, Bay of Quinte. Over the past 3 years, Bay of Quinte Conference has undergone an experiment where we've went from 7 presbyteries to 8 presbyteries. And basically, our presbytery was the one that was affected the most in that we lost almost 50% of our membership churches and then had to start rebuilding from there as far as what our presbytery life would look like. And basically what happened was we lost 40% of our volunteers who decided that that was time to leave active volunteerism in the church. There was no framework for them to work into, and so they found elsewhere to go where there was framework. And they weren't about building the framework. With the presbytery system, the framework was there for them to fall into and become part of. And they had been part of that for years. We're just starting to get that going again. The administrative part has stumbled along, not all the best, because they elected a dyslexic treasurer who's dyslexic around numbers, which happens to be me. So that was fun in and of itself, but it made reports kind of challenging. So we need to consider that we're going to, without giving people some place to go into, and I don't see that in any of the modeling that we've got at the present, and I don't see it in the information pieces. So I think that we really need to be aware that for people to move into into the new model, we need to give them something concrete to go to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, friends, what I'm going to, okay, I'm going to ask, I'll recognize Mike 4 and then there's a lineup. I'm going to actually intervene at this point and say, we've heard from 3 speakers who said, we actually aren't sure we want to have the discussion about whether to go to 3-court or 4-court. And I've heard the wisdom of those 3 speakers, and we could have a lengthy discussion at this point about whether we should or shouldn't, but I'm wanting to test the will of the court. Do we want to proceed with a discussion on having a 3-court system? And I'm going to look for the wisdom, and where are your cards at this point? It still seems to me that there are several people with blue cards, but a large majority say, let's have the discussion. And I am wondering if those who have concerns and reservations would feel they would be able to raise them in the course of the discussion, particularly at certain places when we're looking at some of the details and saying, this is what I mean by missing out. Would that feel agreeable? I'm seeing one head. And Mint, no? Okay, I recognize Mike 4.
I'm looking for, Mint Marcellus, Bay of Quinte Conference. I'm confused as to what you're asking us. Are you asking us about the wisdom of having a 3-court model or what a 3-court model could look like? Because those are 2 different discussions. Because the wisdom of a 3-court model seems to be comparative between a 3-court and a 4-court model, whereas what a 3-court model would look like is the discussion that I was raising my warm card for. So I'm asking for clarification what discussion you're asking us if we want to have.
I'm asking if we want to have the discussion in a significant and meaningful way about having a 3-court system. I think that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it was the original ask about the cards, warm or cool, was just to make sure that there weren't 90% of people here that saying under no circumstances would we consider 3-court. Then you wouldn't want to spend the next 2 hours talking about what a 3-court would look like. What most people seem to be saying is they wanted to have that discussion, and we've had the benefit of some of the perspectives of people that have concerns about that, and that will lead into the discussion of the content, I think, as you move into that.
So with that understanding and clarification, thank you, Mint. One final time of the cards. The wisdom of moving into a discussion of having a 3-court model. Okay, I think we're there. So, we're going to have the discussion about the 3 courts, which brings us then to communities of faith. And we will now start to walk through the details step by step of CRTG 3 as it is revised. Yes, that's usually me. The loud. Now I'm a little lost here.
SC, we're now calling it SC3, but if they could project. If they could project on the screen SC3, as we're now going to call it, but it's the third one we got, the one we got from the Sessional Committee that has all the stuff about, yeah. So I think, moderator, you're suggesting we just work our way through that first section and then go on from there chronologically, right?
Yes, yes. So we are now talking about communities of faith and what they would look like, and you have description, membership, authority, responsibility, etc., going through, right through, over a couple of pages, including limitations. But we're going to go through step by step.
So whoever's scrolling, go back up to that first part, yeah. And then we'll see if people have questions about that, and if not, we'll go to the next part.
So I recognize microphone 2.
Judith Evenden, Bay of Quinte Conference. So now I am confused because it seems to me we're not talking about the whole, but now we're into kind of seriatim. So let me ask my question and you can rule me whatever way you need to. My concern is, as Peter suggested, the length of time that this is going to take with remits. And do we have time to do that given our situation? So my question is also to do with the proposal that General Secretary is bringing before us that we keep bumping along, which is about the not-for-profit, and whether moving on that affects the remit process and might therefore speed up this process and ease some of those concerns.
Sadly, on that one, I don't think so, because that one would require a remit in itself. So that wouldn't happen in this cycle.
The good news is that if we pass GC10 and it goes through remit, then in the future, it will be different. Are you at microphone? Now, I'm going to need some help because sometimes I don't see microphone 4. So I'll recognize microphone 4 and then microphone 2.
All right. Marcellus, Bay of Quinte Conference, again. Sorry, you'll probably be hearing a lot from me. So a lot of my questions are more about the regional council. However, one does fit into this, and it's a question that was brought up at table 29 a number of times. First on page 3, buying, selling, leasing, and renovating community of faith property in cooperation with the regional council. And there's another one under ministry and other leadership. The question that arose at table 29 was, what does cooperation mean and where does the authority lie? Does the authority rest with the congregation but there's feed from the regional council, or does authority rest with the regional council with information from the community of faith?
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
And say, would you be willing to hold that question until we get to that section, which is section ministry and other leadership? The moment I'm just wanting to look at description and membership. If we can go through A, B, C, D.
Sorry.
No.
I thought we were talking about the whole community of faith thing.
We are, but we're doing it bit by bit by bit, just to make it a little easier. I'm hoping. Microphone 2.
Blair Patterson, Montreal and Ottawa Conference, and I have talked with a number of people from the Sessional Committee about this, but I guess I'm not sure if this is required a clarification or this is one of those things that will be answered later on. But I'm not sure as to whether a multiple point pastoral charge is a community of faith or the individual congregations within that multiple point pastoral charge are a community of faith. And I think for those of us in rural ministry that have multiple point pastoral charges, that's something that could be affected by any of these decisions. So could I get a ruling on this or a clarification about what that might be? Thank you.
It's, I think, one that's been on a lot of minds, and I think the intention was it would kind of be up to them. So if the different points wanted to be, just because I think when they used that term, community of faith, it might be a congregation, might be a pastoral charge, might be something of the kinds of things that Aidan talked about last night when we heard from the youth that right now we don't think of as a community of faith, but they would have to have some steps or something to put themselves in the position where they wanted to be considered a community of faith. But there'd be a broader definition, and that is the kind of detail that would be worked out in the further implementation through consultation.
Thanks, James. I recognize microphone 2.
Richard Hollingsworth from Bay of Quinte Conference. I put on my Reformed theology background. I would like for A to be a theological rationale of communities of faith. I think we need to start from my background, from a biblical basis. But I know from Reformed theology, we need to start from a theological basis for what we're doing. And I know we've described it sociologically. We've described it ecclesiastically. We have not described it historically, and neither have we described it theologically. So I'd like to see in this portion of the document, and I'd rather it not be at the end, but at the very beginning, what is the theological orientation for a community of faith?
Do you have some suggested wording, or just at this point you want a theological rationale of some sort?
Well, that's what I was requesting of the theology committee to do on our behalf. But if you're requesting for I to get with Peter White, I don't know, where is Peter? I don't know if we could do it in the time allotted to it, but I'll go check with Peter.
And just the reminder that at the proposal stage, it's getting the wording to a stage that people would be comfortable voting on it. So if there's additional wording or changed wording, that's really helpful when it's offered.
Okay. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Adam Kilner, London Conference. My question is, because there's lots of reading, but I'm confused as to where some of our incorporated ministries fit in. Are they communities of faith? Are they something else? Are they not part of this anymore? Or like a church camp, where does that fit? Is that so I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask that, or?
And just to say, it's a little less clear to me based on the sessional committee report, because the notion of covenant was that if they chose to covenant, then yes, they could be. But whichever way, whether with or without that formal kind of a covenant, I believe that the intention is that the initiative would be theirs, but that it's a two-way relationship, and the church, whether it be the region in whatever form, would be saying, yes, we receive you as that as well.
The reason I ask the question is because for example, my camp receives $31,000 currently every year from the presbytery, and I just want to get paid.
Oh yes, it's always about you.
Microphone number 2.
It's refreshing to know the Secretary General knows Adam so well. I would like to, Matthew, London Conference, I'd like to go to the membership part.
Yeah.
And it seems me that the concept of membership is something that people that have my hair color kind of understand and want, but that the generations hereafter could care less about. And I would hope that the definition of membership could be made a whole lot more flexible than what it appears to be here, and be essentially what the community of faith says is a member.
And I could just offer a comment on that too, because we do have other work going on about membership, a big detailed paper, and I know that the Comprehensive Review Task Group saw it as not their place to redo all that work, and also knowing that that might be a little longer process. So you have before you at this meeting a small piece of that and a recommendation for further work that would be continuing. And I think what they aimed for here was language that could work with whatever came out of that process.
Okay. So just a reminder, we didn't cut off A, but we've moved on to B. So we're now looking at comments on A and B. I recognize microphone 2.
All right. Navin from Conference of Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario. At my conference, at the question round over the comprehensive review, I was told that you could only be a member of one, like officially a member of one community of faith, and that the Yaya and Yay committees would also be a community of faith. So being a member of that and my home church, how would that work?
Great question. And I think it is part of the bigger piece that needs to be addressed through that further work that I'm expecting this meeting will authorize about membership through the Theology and Faith Committee.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Ewan Simeon, London Conference. I'd just like to point out for Adam that under regional councils, under oversight and support of communities of faith, one of the last points, or the last point, is overseeing camps and incorporated ministries.
Okay, thank you. So hold that, mark that note. When we come to regional councils, we can raise it again if needed. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Moderator. David Pollard, Alberta Northwest Conference. I'm going to be referring back to A, around the covenantal relationship between communities of faith and the regional councils. I served for a time in Athabasca, Alberta as a student, and they split in '88. And God bless those people who stayed and fought for their church and for their building and who affirmed the decision that was taken in 1988. This seems to, and I know that God's people are sometimes good and wonderful, and sometimes they're a little persnickety. And in this Part A, there's an assumption that every United Church congregation will want to covenant with the regional council. But what about those that might not? What do we do with those communities of faith, those existing congregations who say, well, I'm not going to enter into a covenant relationship. I don't understand. How does that work? And I'm a little confused because the assumption is that, of course, everyone will want to covenant with the regional council. There are some congregations that are, for whatever reason, may not want to do that. And so I'm just wondering about that.
You mean the same ones that don't go to presbytery now? Yeah. Certain things don't get solved in the drop of a hat, I guess.
I would recognize that that will be one of the concerns in implementation. Is it, how will we make that actually come into real being? Good question. Microphone 2. I know who you are. Say it for the books, though.
Richard Hollingsworth, Bay of Quinte. I've talked with the Reverend Dr. Peter Wyatt. We're willing to try something overnight to give to the court tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm looking at, you're not standing at a mic, are you? No, I didn't think so. So there's nobody in mics over there. I'm not seeing it any of the mics. So it sounds to me like we're saying A and B. We're feeling okay-ish. Let's move to C, authority, responsibility. Comments and questions. I recognize microphone 2.
Kayla Monroe, BC Conference. I just have a quick question. It says that communities of faith would have authority and responsibility for ministry with children and youth. Does that mean that the only ministry for children and youth is going to be in the communities of faith and that there's not going to be any wider ministry? Because that's a concern.
I don't think it means that, but it's always right to name those things to make sure we're all in the same place. But the way I heard that was just lifting up one of the primary things that happens locally, not meaning that it wouldn't happen elsewhere as well.
So microphone 2, and then I'll go to 4, and then back to 2.
If I recall, Aaron Todd, Manager Conference. If I recall, those different groups or different ministries, that list appears, I think, in all the levels. That's intentional. So youth ministry would happen at the local level, the regional level, the denomination level, I believe. It's in there. And you'll see that when we get to the other councils.
Thank you. That's a helpful clarification. Microphone 4. No? Not there. Okay. Microphone. I thought somebody was there. My mistake then. Microphone 2.
I was about to make the same point. The regional councils have children and youth also listed. Oh, yep. Jamie Weber, Montreal Ottawa Conference.
Thank you, Jamie.
I just would like the children and youth also to include young adults.
Minister with children and youth and young adults. Yeah. Let me just, are we warm to that? Adding the phrase young adults to that? Okay, let's put that in, please. Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
Dave Exley, London Conference. Sorry about that. My instant reaction to reading Ministry with Children and Youth was one of excitement as somebody who's worked in youth ministry for many years. But when I read that, I wonder whether that limits the possibilities for our communities of faith. What if there was a community of faith that emerged that out of a retirement home or something like that? Are we saying that we're mandating them to do ministry with children and youth? That's my concern with adding that piece in there, is that does that then limit what we can do with our communities of faith, the varieties of communities of faith we're trying to sort of grow within this United Church?
Do you want to answer? I don't think so, but.
Yeah, we sure wouldn't want that, would we? And I think it could be read either way, but I think you having pointed that out is really, really key, because the whole idea is that there may be some more specialized kinds of ministries. And as has been mentioned about camps, there might be some ministries that were primarily about children and youth and weren't perhaps doing some of the other things.
Thanks.
Okay. Microphone 4.
Vic Weeb. Am I on?
Yep.
Vic Weeb, Saskatchewan Conference, and a member of the former task group. I note that the Sessional Committee has significantly changed the committee's proposals regarding covenants between the community of faith and the regional council. And I noticed their comments last night that they said they really saw covenant as a relationship issue, whereas in fact our work, we saw it as part of, in fact, an agreement between a regional council and a community of faith, because we were trying to move from an oversight authority relationship between the region or presbytery and a community of faith to a self accountability issue, so that there would be a clear statement worked out between the regional council and the community of faith about what this community of faith about, what are their goals and objectives, and and would include some standards by which they would operate, and then they would report on that, much like happens with a lot of organizations with accreditation. If you have a college, its arrangement is an accreditation one. They have standards and practices and things that speak to their organization, and then periodically they do a self-assessment report and says, this is how we're doing. This is how we're doing in accordance with what we said we would do. And we think that self-assessment, self-appraisal, inward looking in terms of saying, are we really doing what we say we want to do? And what we have agreed with our church that we're going to do, are we doing it? As opposed to having somebody come in and say, well, we don't think you're doing this and this and this and this. So I think I would like to suggest that we go back to the wording and to the concepts that were in the original document.
Thank you very much. So let me just hold on to what has been suggested is at the top of page 3, where we've crossed out entering into and substituted living in, that Vic Weeb is suggesting that in fact we return to the original, which would read entering into a covenant with the regional council, etc., etc. Then we might want to have a further discussion about the next line that's crossed out. They go together. But I'm wondering, I'm going to do those one at a time. You've heard some discussion on that. I'm wondering, I want to hold on whatever 2 is about. Do other people have thoughts about what has been raised by Vic Weeb at microphone 2? He's suggesting entering into a covenant rather than living in covenant. Are we warm to that idea, just so I have a sense, or cool to it? We're sort of in the middle here, folks, so we need to have some more discussion about so if someone who would be cool to that notion of the change suggested, of staying with living in covenant rather than entering into a covenant. And 2, if you are talking about that, great. If not, would you be willing to hold your place?
May I speak?
Yes, you may.
John Hurst from Hamilton Conference. In the very next line, which it talks about doing annual self-assessments, and that was crossed out, I would like to uncross that and restore that back, which I think was in line with that discussion. My point of rising was to restore annual self-assessments. We have a need to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you're saying now yours follows from the previous, okay, and gives a timeline to if we say yes, we're in covenant. Okay, clarity, thank you. Microphone 2.
Paul Browning, London Conference. My feeling is we need to streamline our system, and our system, someone pointed this out in a meeting yesterday, we were created at a time where there was great mistrust between denominations who didn't know how this was going to work out. 90 years later, we have to trust each other more to reduce our bureaucratic requirements. And I think leaning into covenants is a good term. I think having to file reports and more paperwork is the last thing we need. I think after 90 years, we need to chill and believe we can trust each other and work together without a lot of requirements, bureaucratic requirements.
Thank you very much. Microphone 4. I'm sorry, I think.
Jim Allen,
no,
Montreal,
sorry, yep,
Ottawa.
thank you.
I am against the proposal going back to the comprehensive review idea because that raised very significantly the bar oversight over congregations. Right now, it's done primarily through the triennial pastoral care and oversights. They don't, anything I've seen doesn't go close to the level of a detailed accountability oversight that this proposal would go. So I would rather leave it as it is in the sessional report.
Okay, thank you very much. Microphone 2.
Steve Barrowbay, Maritime Conference. I live into the covenantal relationship with my wife. She might think that it would be a really good idea to renegotiate it every year and have oversight of it, and I would probably have to agree with her on it, but I really like the idea of living into it.
Thank you very much. Microphone 4, please.
Thank you, Moderator. Dwayne Dornan, Saskatchewan Conference. I hate to disagree with fellow Saskatchewanite, but I would remind people that the process that we used was not to attract deal with the negative. We started with the positive. We started with what was in the report and then tried to incorporate what we heard from the proposals coming from the conferences. There's a difference between making a covenant as an event and living within it as a continuing thing. And that's what we had in mind.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have people here at microphone 2, or no?
Separate issue.
I'll be.
Oh, sorry, microphone 3.
Bill Miller, Winnipeg. I'm no genius on this stuff. It doesn't seem to me that that either of them makes sense until you put some context into it, into what they actually mean. Could we not both enter in? It's a very Canadian thing. Couldn't we just enter in and live, enter into and live in? So there could be an and in there. Is there a?
Okay, okay. Now, is microphone 2, are you wanting to speak to the, no, okay. If you're not wanting to speak, sort of just go.
I got moved mics.
Okay.
Kathy Dahmer, Manitou Conference. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, when this was being read through, we were told that the word covenant simply meant relationship. So I was like putting relationship above where it said covenant. And I find that covenant is such a loaded word that it's hard to, the meanings are very heavy and different. And so later on in the document, there's actually a sentence that says, in covenantal relationship. So I think we either need to pick relationship when we mean relationship and covenant when we mean covenant. My other comment was I'm reading lots under membership and authority and responsibility, lots about membership and administrating it in spiritual life. If I haven't found it, let me know, but I'm looking for baptism, confirmation. Yes, we understand membership, but I still identify as a baptized and baptizing community of faith, and I would love for this document to have that vocabulary.
Okay. I'm going to hold that one because that looks like it might be something to add, Kathy, when we come to the spiritual life, when they have policies on membership. So, or leave it for the membership document. We now have a possibility provided by Bill Monroe of saying entering into and living in covenant. It seems to sort of hold the two together, maybe. Are you warm to that? Far more warm than just having the one. It's mixed, though, definitely mixed. Are we warmer just to say we'll live in covenant, which is what the Sessional Committee has offered? Please just give me a sense of where we are there. We seem to prefer the living in rather than entering into. I think that's where we are, not taking it as a vote, but just as a read. And so we have a speaker who has said we should do take out the cross out of the doing the annual self-assessments. Tell me, are you warm to restoring annual self-assessments of the ministry of the community of faith? Or cool? More cool to it. Okay. Do we have any final comments? Ross, are you coming to offer a comment there?
Yes, Moderator. Ross Bartlett, Maritime Conference. What the Sessional Committee struggled with in trying to balance the proposals from the conferences with what we saw in the CDRTG report is a fundamental question of the relationship between the regional body, whatever name you give to it, and the local communities of faith. And it's been articulated quite well that the CRTG report, at least as the church seems to have been reading it, had a far greater sense of autonomy for the communities of faith. And so they would file a covenant. They would enter into a covenant as a document on which ongoing evaluation, self-assessment, response could take place. What we heard in the proposals from the conferences was that there was a desire for a greater continuing ongoing linkage so that that autonomy which was perceived by the church in the CRTG report would not be as strong. Now, I don't know anybody who thinks that we do oversight particularly exquisitely in the current incarnation, but there was a sense that the autonomy of the scene that was perceived, whether intended or not, perceived in the CRTG report, changed our tradition of being church together in ways that the proposals from the conferences could not support. And so we are using covenant in two different ways. Entering into covenant, according to the CRTG report, in broad terms means writing a document and promising it. Living into covenant was the language that seemed to be being used for the sort of ways in which we do church now, in which we are more organically intertwined. Okay. And so it's a fundamental choice.
Okay. There are a number of other speakers, and I know this feels like we're spending a lot of energy on this one, but I think, as Ross said, this is a very significant issue. So this is one that's worth wrestling with. So I recognize microphone two, and then I'll go to 4.
Kathy Hamilton, Synode Montréal et Ottawa. One of the voices that I would like to raise to the floor is what we heard from our consultation with congregations. One of the very top things that congregations said when we listened to them was that we need to feel ourselves whole, and we need the liberty to do what we need to do the way we do it. And oversight felt like control. That may not be what the presbyteries were intending, but that's what the congregations told us. It feels like control. It feels like a barrier to doing the ministry that we know needs to be done and that we know how to do. And it was in response to that voice from the congregations that we tried to find another method of calling to account the work of a congregation. And so it is in that light that the idea of a covenant was offered to the church. The idea that the community of faith knows the mission in its area, knows what needs to be done, and is prepared to call itself to account. Now, we can argue about whether it should be annual or all those kinds of things, but the issue was about allowing the congregations to call themselves to account.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I'm just going to say I keep missing looking at the clock, so it is the 90 seconds. And I'm going to try and hold to that so we have a variety of voices. Microphone 4.
Jan Stevenson, Alberta Northwest Conference. When it comes to living in covenant, you make it official the day you get married, but you can bet that I expect an affirmation and a hot date at least once a year.
Sorry. Thank you. Microphone 2.
Janet Sigurdsson, All Native Circle Conference and Saskatchewan Conference. I am wondering whether it could fit in here, and I'm sorry for being so whimsical, but we are also recognizing ourselves as stewards for the land and stewards for the four-legged, the swimming, the brothers. And I'm wondering if that's befitting there to recognize that we also are stewards, to live in covenant with God's creation. I know, it's whimsical, it's far-fetched, but I also feel it's a necessity.
Okay.
I mean, with all the oil and the water being in trouble, and it would be a good testament to our United Church faith.
I'm wondering if you might want to create some language, and it might become part of what has been added of joining hearts, voices, and resources, ministry with children and youth, intercultural, and maybe adding something about stewardship of land and all my relations.
Thank you.
Would it fit? I think it might fit there.
Well, I'm kind of wondering if it even fits in, but I'd like our church to be known as stewards of the land as well, and the dwellers. Because, you know, we can talk until we're blue in the face, but it would be nice to have it written down and recognized by other churches that we are stewards.
Okay.
Janet, if you could offer some wording to the business table, then as they're putting together what would be shown at the later stage, you could have that wording up there. That would be super.
Well, could I get a card, like warm cards or cold cards or whatever, into this? Because I don't want to do something for nothing.
Yeah, see if people are warm to having this.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Are people warm to this idea of including a statement about care for?
Thank you.
Thank you. It is definitely worth the doing.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Microphone 4.
Sorry for being back up here again, Mint Marcellus Bay of Quinte Conference. Would it be possible to have the picture-in-picture that we had earlier on the screen so we see the language that we're working with?
Okay.
One of the earlier warm and cold things when we were making a decision about language, it wasn't up there and it was a little confusing.
Thank you very much. That's a good practical suggestion. So if we could have up on the screen the language that we're working with. Okay, I recognize microphone 2.
Nelson Hart, All Native Circle Conference. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon in this area. But my feelings and I don't know what else, I've been sitting here for the last 2 days in tears. Now, whether those tears are with joy or sadness, but there's nothing regarding Aboriginal, intercultural, or Francophone people are really mentioned in this court. I only see it as either it's underlined or crossed out. Where are we going from those three? And including myself, that I'm part of the United Church. Where are we going? especially on Aboriginal people. So we didn't ask for this as Aboriginal people. You gave it to us as Aboriginal people, whether we were Mohawk, Cree, Anishinaabe, or whatever. But nobody ever really wants to acknowledge what we think or how we feel. I think I overtake my time because of the thing that we always is so concerned about is the time. Thank you. And you were able to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Microphone 2.
Shirley Clark, Maritime Conference. I speak in favor of the return of the self-assessments because going along with what Kathy Hamilton said, I'm thinking of all our rural churches who are out there kind of doing their own thing in the community and setting their own mission and ministry in their setting with what they know how to do and what they have to work with. And we've listed, added many ministries here, great ministries, but maybe that's not where they're at. And, you know, if they had a tool to help them assess where they're at on a yearly basis or every 2 years, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I noticed that you said annual or every 2 years, which is that second one, so that could be dealt with separately, whether it should be annual or you need a hot date or every 2 years or 3. But thank you. Microphone 2.
Kate Crawford, London Conference. I would love a hot date. But I'd also like to speak to doing annual self-assessments. I've had the privilege and the joy of being on pastoral oversight committees in 2 different conferences and chairing those committees. And I can tell you that 9/10 of the time when the pastoral oversight visit takes place, the congregation is delighted. They feel supported and they thank us for the time and the effort of arriving. 1/10 of the time, when things aren't going well, they really don't want to see us come. So it is important to have pastoral oversight visits or to have some kind of assessment process between the region and the congregation. I fear that anything that has to take place every year will become a checkbox. Did it, did it, did it, did it, did it. I think annual self-assessment is too much. I would like to test the will of the court to take that word out, recognizing that we want to do regular self-assessments.
Regular. Okay. So this is a quick test on the assumption that we would go in that direction, which we haven't fully decided, but if we did, to replace annual with regular, would you be warm to that? Basically, yes. So we're still wrestling with whether to call it living in or living at, having but I recognize microphone 2.
Donnelly Williams, Alberta Northwest Conference. It has not been mentioned or noticed yet, but one of the changes in the sessional committee speaks to, takes out including members of the Order of Ministry in their membership in the local community of faith, and I guess, and instead having their membership in the wider regional body. And I'm actually in favor of that change. And I think about that relational covenantal thing and also the accountability piece. We're speaking about making assessments. And I wonder if the membership of the ministry, order ministry people in the wider body might assist in that accountability process and in being part of that. So I want to lift that up. So I just, because that's a pretty significant change
Yes.
from that, the membership of the ministry persons.
I appreciate that, and that's helpful because as we moved on to C, there had been no comments about that change, and so it's been named. And just to draw to the attention of the court, what we basically said, order of ministry will be not as members of the local community of faith. Microphone 2.
Paul Douglas Walfall, Alberta and Northwest Conference. I wish to lift up a voice that I think has not been heard. While I've heard that the initial round of the comprehensive review heard strongly from congregations that they wanted more autonomy, I also heard from the congregations in the rural parts of Alberta through their presbyteries and at our conference that they shuddered and had palpitations to consider more autonomy, that they wanted a more integral point with the other courts of the church, that extreme autonomy, as was being proposed by the CRGT, was not what they wanted. So I wanted that other voice to be heard as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm noticing we have 4 people at the mics, and I'm going to be able to let them speak, but at this point, we're then going to have to end this discussion, and for now, because we'll be moving into the commissions, and we'll be picking it up again. So I think microphone 4, and then 3 people at 2.
Rick Balson from M&O Conference. Just as a piece of information, maybe to help guide some people, M&O has introduced a review process for congregations, and we're just beginning to live into that. It's meeting with very good success because congregations are able to review their own position. They're doing it annually at the moment. They do it at their regular meetings. So it's not an extra piece of work for them, and it's seen as being for their benefit, as opposed to being for the benefit of somebody else.
So you're suggesting,
I would suggest that we keep the wording that we see in front of us now, doing regular self-assessment of ministries of community faith.
And in that first part, would you say you're saying entering into a covenant or living in covenant?
I think we're fine with living into.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Microphone 2.
Ken Pettigrew, Hamilton Conference. When I first read this, it was through the eyes of the chair of presbytery, and I could just see it as how can they possibly survive without presbytery? And last night I reread it as a member or chair-elect of my council. And in the spirit of everything we did yesterday and a new thing, I read it as, how can I do something and how can you help me? And whether we call it entering into or being into or whatever it is, it's my community of faith wants to do this. How can you help me?
Okay, thank you. Microphone 2.
Carolyn Penhale, Consistoire d'Ottawa, Montreal, and Ottawa Conference. I've been wondering whether this would be helpful, and so I'm late to the microphone. I wonder if we could replace entering into and replace living in, either with simply the word to, or since that doesn't work terribly well with the for that precedes it, turning covenant into a verb, if that would be grammatically acceptable. So we would either to covenant or covenanting would be where that would go. Simply to simplify things and to emphasize covenant as a verb. And the last thing I'd say is I think that how covenant is being used here is explained later on in the phrase when we read about mutual responsibilities for the life and mission of the community of faith. There's a mutuality that's implied. So just to simplify the language, either to covenant or covenanting with this notion of mutual responsibility.
Okay. So just hold on there, because I've basically been feeling we're saying we have said more no to entering into, more warm to living in. Now you're suggesting another change of covenanting with or to covenant with. So are people aware of that change? Are you warm or cool to the change that has been proposed at Mic 2? More cool, I think. Let me just do another test then. Are you warm or cool to say, let's stay with living in covenant? That's much warmer and a couple of cool. So I think in terms of our proposal, we are at living in covenant and doing regular self-assessment, I think. microphone 2, and somebody slipped up to microphone 4, so this is the beginning. Grace, you'll have a chance to speak, but no more at this moment.
Tom Smart, Bay of Quinte Conference. We changed from annual to regular self-assessments, which is good. I think we may have inadvertently deleted the requirement to file that report with the regional council. At least at my table, I think we thought we were keeping that requirement.
Okay, let's just check. What we have is doing regular self-assessments of the Minister of the Community of Faith. Are you warm to maintaining and filing the report with the regional council, or are you cool? Mostly warm, some negative to that. Mostly warm, so we'll keep it in. We may want to return to that and just do one more check. Microphone 4.
Katie Vardy, Newfoundland and Labrador Conference. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a general council where there's supposed to be big changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why are we spending so much time wordsmithing and kind of tiptoeing around the inevitable? Like, there's going to be changes, so I don't really understand why we aren't hopping into it. I know change is scary, but it has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Okay, I hear you. I hear you. I think, let me do one more check. We've got ourselves to A and B and C, C as it's reported up there. Do we feel essentially warm to those 3, A, B, and C, or cool? So it's not a vote, just let me see. Oh, we didn't? Oh, okay, thank you. Basically, very warm. And Nora pointed out that we actually didn't have time to deal with all the additions that the... Oh, I'm sorry, I was just... Yes, okay, well, we're going to stop at the governance and administration. We're going to have to pick that one up. Is that, now, microphone 3? You've been waiting a long time. No, you've been waiting, Susan.
Sorry, Susan from All Native Circle Conference. I just wonder if it's appropriate to include under mission, ministry and mission with including but not limited to Aboriginal communities, given that the court has already accepted CRTG2, and the essence of that proposal is that First Nations communities, whatever we are, would be given additional time to sort out what we're going to look like in this new process. So that's not to say that we wouldn't be part of this, and it appears again in the regional councils. Again, it's not to say we wouldn't buy into a regional council structure. It's just that we as Aboriginal ministries haven't said yes to this. So is that appropriate to include that?
It's a really excellent point, and I think what we did with Janet's point was to see if she wanted to come up with wording. I wonder if I might suggest that, Susan, you and Janet have a conversation and see if it's appropriate to offer wording or not, because the point you're making is the Aboriginal Ministries is on a separate track because of the proposal that we've already looked at in number 2.
Yeah, just invite anyone associated with Aboriginal Ministries into that discussion.
Yeah, to offer their advice as Janet was trying to work on something. Thank you.
Okay. Friends, we've dealt with 1. We've dealt with 2. We've dealt with a beginning. A good beginning of number 3. I want to say I so appreciate your attentiveness and our willingness to go with time. I'm hearing the voice of a microphone 4, Katie, saying, hey, we've got to keep working on the jump. I'm also hearing us say, we're going to jump, but we do it with care, to make sure that, in fact, there might be a bungee rope where we're going to be dangling but not lost. Microphone 2, were you wanting to speak?
I was just saying that I did work on it, and there is another bullet coming that would include the covenant with Mother Earth.
Okay. So do we want to deal with it? No. Deal with it now? No. Okay. So the wisdom is that we won't deal with it now. We will be picking this discussion up tomorrow morning. We will have worship and then plenary business and then a little bit more closing worship and then some Sabbath time. So hold on to where we're at. Don't lose those documents, and we will return. So now I'd like to invite friends of the court to come up. We have some announcements, and then we will be returning to commissions.
Good. Well done.
Teamwork here. This is exhausting. We need the microphone here on the podium.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Salut mes amis. Comment ça va? Vous êtes encore plein d'énergie, c'est bien. OK. Quelques annonces. Something else? Yeah. Who? Please announce to meet here with comfortable shoes. Who announce? Who meet here?
I think it's everybody for spiritual practice.
Oh, 7:20 tonight. Wear comfortable shoes for spiritual practices. Here, okay. All right, copious pieces of paper. Request, we need to be mindful of what we allow to be on the floor where we walk. Items like candy wrappers and the cap from a pen can cause injury to those who are not quite so nimble on their feet. Alors, faites attention à les choses que vous laissez tomber à terre. The young adults will be doing a secret pen pal for this week. And if you would like to be involved in this, you can visit the youth leaders table, which is over in that corner by the first aid table. Bring your name and your table number. Alors, votre nom puis numéro de table, si vous êtes capable d'écrire en français, si vous voulez être quelqu'un qui peut écrire les lettres en secret, and see Jess at table 46, and they will be distributing the names of the young people to the secret pals and to you, so you can have letters going back and forth. You can explain to them all what's going on. Okay. Choir practice, we had that one Thursday and Friday at lunchtime. The Alvin Dixon ribbons have arrived. They can be picked up in the book room for those who participated. That's up there. Okay, very important. If you want to go home, not today, mais si vous voulez partir samedi ou dimanche ou n'importe quand, whatever your ticket number says, all who need departure transportation must connect with the transportation desk, which is in the lobby of the Civic Studio, right where you go in to eat. La table d'information. Please be prepared to provide your flight number, flight time, and the name of where you are staying. And they will help you arrange your transportation to the airport. Tomorrow afternoon, nous avons un après-midi libre, and there are all kinds of activities planned for this. I didn't get an answer about lunch. Pick up your bag and go. All right, so pick up your bag, your lunch bag, and go. The Western Brook Pond Boat Tour. You have to meet in the parking lot at the Kinsman Center door at 12 noon sharp with your lunch. The Tablelands Hike, same place. The Zip Tours, same place. The Bay Street George Mi'kmaq Cultural Circle, same place. Western Haven Camp, same place, but at 1 o'clock. And the river rafting tour also leaves at 1 o'clock, and the tours of local churches meet at 2 o'clock. But always at the same, out that door, okay? All right. Today is the anniversary of the birthday of Stella Burry, who was born in 1897. And if she had lived, she would be 118 today. She died in 1991. So not only is today significant for her, but if you haven't started your knitting yet, these squares, toutes les carrés vont faire une grande couverture. We're making blankets to go to the Stella Burry mission. So that's what the knitting's all about. So there's knitting wool, or if you'd rather crochet, they've got hooks and wool over there. Tout le monde pour participer et pour aider and honor Stella. Okay, What else have I got? Oh, somebody else's birthday, I think, was yesterday. John Barr. But we didn't sing to you. So let's sing to John Barr. Is John Barr in the court? There we go. All right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you. I hope you had a chance at lunchtime today to go up to the book room and buy a copy of Lois Wilson's book and get it signed. If not, she's at a table back here and always happy to sign. On Thursday at lunchtime, there will be a sale and book signing for Bill Stedman's Theology and Interchurch. Oh no, that's what he's chair of. Sorry. The book is called Wake Up Church. And so Bill's at table 54, but if you want to get a signed copy, you can go there or you can go up there. Okay. Don't forget your pop tabs. I saw in the cafeteria last night lots of tins going into the garbage pails with the tabs still on them. And there are jars at coffee tables and at information desks to collect the little tabs. Those are going to buy wheelchairs. Les languettes de canettes boisson gazeuse mettent les petites choses dans le pot sur les tables de collation. And don't forget about 25 cents for trees pour l'emplante écologique. Et je pense que c'est tout, Monsieur le modérateur. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Rosemary. So, friends, in a moment, I am going to invite you to return to your commissions. You will continue in your commissions and then have grace within the commission and then gather in the next room for supper. If you are working expeditiously, then you will have a little stretch time. If not, then you know you have your deadline, and at the end of the break for dinner, work not dealt with will be referred to General Counsel Executive. So that is some incentive to focus and get work done. We will then regather at 7:30 here for a time of celebration, some theological reflection, and then we will move into spiritual practices. Now, I want to just remind you that I think it was just yesterday or the day before that I often said when I'm feeling so busy, I realize I don't have time for prayer, but when I'm so busy, that's most when I need prayer. And so this evening we have been very deliberate to offer an opportunity for us to engage in different ways and forms of prayer, to do it both individually but also as a community. I know that sometimes in the past when spiritual practices have been offered, people say, well, maybe I won't go there. I'll just do something quiet in my own room. I understand that, trust me, but I would encourage you strongly to come together for the celebration and to act in a movement of pilgrimage from this place to the Arts Center where we will engage in different forms, and that there will be a chance for us not only to discuss and debate together, but to pray together on precisely the questions that are in our hearts and that we're raising about the future of our church and what God is calling us to be and do. So how best and how better might we prepare for that than through praying together? I think that's it. Au revoir, bonne chance, and good work in your commissions.